Welcome to press coverage. Hello, everyone. This is Kyle Senra, as always, hosting this great show on the Going for Two Live network. Joining me for my guest for this show is Josh Smokey Hell Nelson. How you doing, Josh?
I'm fantastic, and a happy post-Easter to you, my man, Kyle.
Yeah, for sure. Just getting closer and closer to the NFL draft. In fact, this will be the last episode of the show before the NFL draft. So I know we're gonna have tons of great draft content coming up on the Going for Two Live network. We've got shows all 3 days, hour longs type, hours and hours, all 3 days really. I'll be hosting Dynasty Gambit. We're doing a special Saturday episode to cover day 3. I know last year I think we went 3 hours, so probably be about the same this year again. But yeah, definitely lots of great fun on the Going for Two Live network. And as always, listeners, viewers can interact live on the Going for Two Live YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook pages. You can tune in on Twitter, but we can't see the comments, unfortunately. So if you do want to interact and ask myself or Josh any questions or have any comments, feel free to, again, stop in over on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, and definitely get to all those interactions. But Josh, how are you doing? I guess I already asked that, but I hope you're still doing good.
In the last couple minutes, I've actually taken off even more, so I'm even better now, man. So thank you for asking again.
Okay, good. Escalator on the show. I guess that's a good sign. So something's going right. But yes. Well, I guess moving forward, but part of this is also looking back. So we're gonna go right back to the origins of Josh as a young Hellion and a Hell Nelsian. I don't know. I'll make other puns with that. But what in the Nelson household? What were sports like? What was your first exposure to sports and your first sports memories?
Well, I grew up in a house where my dad, diehard hockey guy. He comes from Toronto, so he's died in the wool leafer from day one. He was around to witness the last cup they might have ever won, but we won't dive into that. My mom, more of a ball player, but super huge into sports. But as a Canadian, I think I'm required to answer hockey. And it's actually the truth. My parents had me on skates when I was 2, playing hockey when I was 4. So, kind of fleeting memories only. I mean, this was 35 plus years ago. As a sports fan, though, growing up, I didn't really lock down to certain teams, only certain players that I admired and emulated. But I remember the excitement of locking down my Flyers fandom in 1995 with the Eric Desjardins trade. I think we've talked about this one before, which led to the excitement of going into the 97 Stanley Cup Finals, which in turn led to my first taste of fandom disappointment as the Flyers got swept like a dusty floor by a Detroit powerhouse of the 90s. But that's the thing that gets you hooked, though. The emotional investment. It's almost stronger when it's driven by disappointment. For when that's coupled with the hope of next year, it just goes stronger until like its grip is unshakable.
And I mean, that's kind of an interesting what if moment too, right? I mean, he's Detroit Red Wings powerhouse, but that was the first for them. I mean, they because I think 2 years before that, if I remember correctly, they got swept in the finals by the Devils on the way to their kind of powerhouse run of 3 cups in, I guess, 8 years. So for the Red Wings, if they maybe lose the Flyers in that final, maybe they don't have the confidence to then sweep the Capitals the very following year, or 2002 or 2008 even. So who knows how much the repercussions of that one kind of cup final and. The team that kind of, again, maybe was disappointed so much by that 95 final where they didn't win a single game, even though I'm pretty sure they had like the best record. They were the number 1 seed. It's, later on, the Red Wings later kind of used to maybe being the number 1 seed in disappointing playoff performances, like 2-3 to the Ducks, 0-6 to the Oilers, a few notable ones. But yeah, funny because, hockey was the theme of the Canadian National Best Ball Champions League last year, and I was in the Red Wings division. What division were you in?
Me too, baby. I was right there with you in Detroit. Rock City!
I think you did better than, because I went the full Detroit theme. I did the Detroit Lions stack, except for Amon-Ra, which would have been the one to have. But yeah, I did not do so well.
That's all right. It's all for charity and good times, right, brother?
Yeah, I mean, but well, yeah, and good times, right? Fantasy sports that gives us the such a great feeling. And when did you first get that exposure, fantasy sports and all that?
So for me, like I said, I've been a sports person my whole life. I played it my whole life. I've been a fan most of my well, as long as I can remember. But with fantasy sports, it was a bit of a later thing for me. I mean, like up in Canada here, it was barely a whisper unless you're in the right circles. And I didn't find myself in the right circles apparently until about 2009. Now, at that time, I was bartending down in Victoria, which is our province's capital. And I got roped into an ESPN standard scoring league with some guys from the bar, including the owner. And I was the total noob that they brought in just to fill the league up. And I learned the first valuable lesson in fantasy, we'll say the hard way, to draft with your head and not with your heart. Too many Cowboys. It didn't work out good. For anyone that doesn't know, I'm a diehard Cowboys fan. But yeah, I learned the hard way that you can't just load up on your team and expect success if your real team is not seeing success.
Yeah, like doing that like this year might be okay, but maybe 2009
nowadays.
Yeah.
But oh man, can we just say how pitiful this offseason has been for the Cowboys? Like, even if you bag on the Cowboys, you must have so much ammunition right now. Like we got nothing for Amari Cooper in comparison to the other deals that were flying around. We won't dive into it. Let's stay on topic here. Yeah, I jumped into fantasy sports within the last 15 years, we will say, and that's been it. I've been absolutely hooked since then.
If it makes you feel any better, just think Robert Woods deal, right? Like that's pretty equivalent to the Amari Cooper trade. So if you look at those two, it doesn't. Maybe it makes you feel better. I don't know. I hope anyway.
No, because Amari Cooper. I don't hear what I'm not saying. I love Robert Woods, reliable Robert, Bobby, man. I love him. I have often had him on my rosters year after year, but Amari Cooper, in my books, he's a tier or two above him.
Anyway, yeah, so I got a comment here. Well, just to talk about like the fantasy sports aspect, right? And I mean, we're getting too much into the specifics of fantasy football, but back to the pullback of fantasy sports, right? And I mean, saying, yeah, hockey, right? I'm a jack of all trades. What was your first fantasy sport that you played? Because for myself, it actually was hockey. I started with hockey playoff pools before I jumped into fantasy football. So, oh yeah, I guess you said it was fantasy football. So, did you have any exposure beforehand to fantasy hockey? Because I know that's maybe more prevalent here, more popular.
Yes and no. Like I would do points league, so there was no roster setting or anything. You picked your players at the very beginning of the season, and win, lose or draw, those are the guys that you're rolling with. So I did that for years and years and stuff. I didn't really consider that fantasy sports because to me, the fantasy aspect of it is you are the manager of that team. You are making roster decisions, post draft roster decisions, we will say. You're setting lineups and stuff like that. To me, that is the core of fantasy beyond just like a points pool or a weekly pick'em league for football. So yeah, I've done those, but the first actual fantasy sport I played was football. I have done fantasy basketball. I've done fantasy hockey since then. I've got championships in both those and went out on top. Never again. Too many damn games, man. That's the beauty about football. One game a week that you have to worry about. And even then, man, the work involved researching and all that stuff, like on this side of things, man, that one game a week, that's good enough for me. Good enough.
Well, I love this story here. Fantasy basketball, 1999, $100 budget in the auction. So right off the bat, auction the very first. I love and admire that. I respect that. Go right for the auction. That's fun. Paying $91 for Shaq. I mean, if you could fill the rest of your lineup with $9, maybe that's worth it. I'd have to jump into the league specifics, but Shaq's just that kind of house wrecker, budget wrecker here.
Well, I mean, back in 1999, though, it's not bad years to have a guy like that. But
I guess
that's a large chunk of your budget, man.
Well, basically, that's the thing. You're basically like you're spending it all there, and you actually can't live anywhere but a shack. So that's kind of the beauty of the poetic beauty there. But speaking of beauties, we got some beauties in the chat here. Will Harris for sure. not to just jet sweep right over him.
Love you, baby.
The good combination between Josh and Will. Richard as well coming in and talking about everyone else in the chat as well. So good to show the love for everyone that's here on screen in the chat. And apparently, going all in for Shaq was terrible. I had to trade him for a bunch of okay players just to compete.
These are the things, though. This is how we learn, by doing terrible decisions.
And the one nice thing about an auction, I will say, is once the auction's over, it's done, right? Like, it doesn't matter what the price the player you paid for anymore. Now it's just, okay, well, now I've got this roster, so then you could just, from there, you're not limited by that contract or anything anymore, unless it's a salary cap contract lead, which I love, but we won't get into that. This is, again, supposed to be about Josh. So, jump from, sports playing. You said you started with hockey to the, really then watching and then investing into fantasy sports. What made you want to reinvest in the community and start creating fantasy football content?
Well, I kind of evolved as a fantasy player to the point where, this will be familiar to a lot of people out there, where there's like a demarcation line, and you get across it, and you're past the point of being just a casual, where you're poring over articles. I had been a steadfast listener of several big podcasts, and all of that information just coalesced, and at some point it just started making sense in relation to the game. And it got to the point where I'd be listening to a podcast, and when they'd ask a question, I'd be answering it before they do. And I'm wondering to myself, well, how can I use this? So I was already helping coworkers with advice in their leagues and stuff like that. And I had already, an overkill amount of recording equipment that I had amassed over years from being a musician. So why not try podcasting? So I went in with a non-specific title, The Smoke Show, based on my music stage name of Smokey Hell Nelson. And this way I wasn't bound by any one specific direction that I could take the podcast, which is, helping as I dive into this next phase of it.
And so, we guess next phase, but we'll get to the next question right away. So what were your biggest influences? Smoke Show. So I guess we could, one obvious influence, to be fair, but we'll say sentient humans as an influence.
Let's stay on that track. Honestly, for so many different reasons. One of the biggest was Adam Rank, as NFL Network is one of the few sports channels I get on my package up here. Sports coverage in Canada sucks, unless you're going, out of market stuff. But anyways, Adam's delivery, his energy, his way of always keeping a viewer's engagement was very influential. When I relaunched the Smoke Show in its current format, I actually got to cross an item off my bucket list, as he was my first full-length feature interview when I relaunched that show. But in fantasy football, he was my first feature interview, but that's another story for another day. Anyways, growing up, I loved live comedy. And later, I actually worked for years in a comedy club. And I always appreciated when humor can be interjected into what can be an industry parade of stats fest by very smart humans who have all the personality of a discarded Tim Hortons cup with the rim rolled up. That's a double on Canadian bingo for those folks playing along at home. But comedy, humans like the fantasy footballers, the Harmons, the Lozas of the world, they were huge influences on me. But one that isn't football related, it's a guy by the name of Sebastian Major, a fellow Canadian on the other side of the country, back in your kind of corner, who hosts my favorite podcast. Has nothing to do with sports. It's called Our Fake History. And I have listened to his collection of over 150 episodes at least twice. And these things go minimum 45 minutes. Some of them are hour and a half, 2 hours long. And honestly, I can get lost in them like nothing else out there. They're just so encapsulating. He's got just a very nice voice that's not put you to sleep, but it just kind of rolls. It's got good cadence and everything like that. And he does all his own music as well. Like Mike Wright from the Fantasy Footballers, who were both influential for me in that respect, as I also do all the old music for my stuff.
Smoke Show.
Yeah! That's me on those falsetto vocals there.
Yeah. Well, they sound great. I could tell it was you. I could tell it was your voice. It comes through clearly that it's your voice. Well, I'm glad you're laughing because a question didn't have on the show sheet, but just kind of brought it up. So again, anyone who's watched the show before, the top fives, we'll get to that. But real quick, just straight comedy. Do you have a favorite comedian?
Oh, George Carlin, hands down.
Oh,
Yeah,
so we're like-minded
was,
in that sense. So
oh,
shocker.
absolutely. He was amazing. Number two for me, Norm Macdonald, who I guess kind of recently passed. Absolute legend, man. Norm's delivery was just you couldn't beat it. You couldn't match his delivery if you studied for 20 years, endless hours every day. It was so perfect. It was so him, and he was a national treasure. God rest his damn soul.
I mean, to a sense, Carlin too, right? The rant
Mhm.
cadence, like he mastered that for sure.
Oh, for sure. And just the intelligence. Carlin, I've got one of his books on my bookshelf back here. I just absolutely love the guy. He was a genius.
Not vocabulary you're necessarily used to hearing with comedy, both in the most vulgar extremes back in his first days, but also just like the next high level thinking, right? And he really could play like the large scope to, in his idea, that's a good thing. It reaches more target audience, right? So from a selfish standpoint, that's good, but also it could convey the largest messages. So yeah, I agree with Carlin's my favorite as well.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd throw Bill Hicks up there. I thought that's one of maybe the closest who could kind of come close to that type of same intensity, energy, but not, pretty over the top, to be fair. So what's, maybe not go too over the top here, but what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who is starting out? Because we don't want to go too over the top to someone who's maybe trying to get into the content creation space.
Okay, so when you okay, little peek behind the scenes, guys. I had a sneak peek of these questions beforehand. I wasn't sure which direction you were going here, so I was gonna say, as a player, like a fantasy player, don't be afraid to go get your guys. I mean, a lot of people are gonna say, "Be water," blah blah blah, but don't be afraid to go get your guys, man.
Well, and I'll say at the heart of fantasy football content creation is playing fantasy football, right? So someone who wants to kind of get started, the best idea is to just keep playing more and more, because that's, you're going to create content for yourself just by what you're doing in your leagues and the processes you're putting in.
100%. And just be cognizant of all these things that you do and your opponents do. Just always be watching, always be taking everything in. Just have the voracious appetite for information. It's always worked for me anyways. But as a content creator, just be yourself, man. It's so easy to see through the fakeness and the other things that some people can put forth. And you don't need to, man. You humans are good. Let yourself shine through, man.
Yeah, true. And I mean, just going back to like even the Adam Rank episode, right? I mean, it seemed like he knew you were Canadian, because I remember watching that and he was all decked out in Canadian gear, right? And that's obviously he's not Canadian, so not necessarily something he would naturally be used to doing, all decked out in red like I am tonight. But so like just the human side, right? He kind of like going in, got to kind of know you as a human better. So like, kudos to Adam Rank. I know he's been on the Going for Two Live network. Even just like last Monday, he was on the 2-point conversion. Nice. I know he's tends to make an annual appearance on that show. So that might be it for this year. Who knows? But check out the 2-point conversion every Monday that I'm not on. So including next Monday, which will be May, pulling up the calendar, 25th. So quick plug for the 2-point conversion there in the middle of the episode. Go for two as often as you can, and apparently that includes right now. All right, so I guess next is favorite hobbies. So this could again, yes, smoke show. So, but favorite hobbies, Josh. Anywhere you want to take it.
Well, honestly, there's so many. For those who can't tell, I have ADHD. So I feel like I am living like 5-6 different lives at once, honestly. And there's never going to be enough time in this world for me to do everything that I think I can accomplish. So trying to do it, kind of branch out a little bit everywhere to try to put my fingers in as many pies as possible. Like I've done video game creation, like I mentioned before, a self-recording musician over the years. But I have a son. Little Felix is 3.5, coming up on 4 here. And so most of these things are kind of on a temporary hiatus. until Felix is a little bit older, as he is an attention sponge in the best way. But music was always the big kind of passion since it's a very, very young age, self-taught and all that stuff. And I've tried my hand in, you name a genre, I've tried my hand in at least once.
So was little Josh going around with a mini guitar on skates? Is that was?
No, the guitar would have been a prop at that point because I actually never learned an instrument or anything until I was, oh Christ, we're coming up probably like 2007, 2008, something like that. I've been a vocalist my whole life, but it was at that point where I was just so frustrated because when I write a song, I hear the whole thing in my head, and to get it out, and if you don't play an instrument, how do you describe to someone? It's like it's like trying to talk Cantonese to someone who is fluent in it when you don't know the language at all, but you hear the language in your head, but you can't articulate it. It's impossible. So at a certain point, I just got so frustrated with it that I ended up just buying a bunch of instruments, like, just one by one or whatever, and teaching myself. Being, a vocalist my whole life, I can pick up things pretty good by ear. So I just kind of did it that way. And, you try to jam with as many people as possible to really, it's just like in a sport, you play with people above your competition level, and soon your skills are coming up at a rapid pace where, like, I'll put on Slayer now and I'll start, playing that by ear. But yeah, those were the kind of the big hobbies that dominated my life.
Do you remember what your first instrument was? Like not just like which instrument type, but also the exact model? Okay, yeah, you do. You're gonna grab it. So clearly, an acoustic.
This one right here, 3/4 size classical acoustic, does not have a name, brand, or anything on there. I got this for $100 at a pawn shop in town here. Back in probably 2006. So it was a little while before I actually dived in and started learning it. But it's being a classical guitar, it had the nylon strings on there. I wasn't a big fan of that, so I swapped them out. It's got phosphor bronze on the bottom 4 strings here, and then steel strings for the top 2. And the action is really high on it, so it's wicked for like slide guitar work and stuff like that. So I keep it in an open tuning, and yeah, this is the one that's been there from the beginning.
Wow. Awesome. And I guess just guitar specific, you said it was 3/4 length. So is the neck not as thick as what you'd expect from a nylon string classical as well? So maybe a little easier, especially for learning, or
kind of, but it's the neck width and everything like that. It's kind of the same. It's just shorter. And so it's I'm not gonna lie, it was extremely uncomfortable to learn on, especially when you're getting into the upper frets and everything like that. Like I can still feel the pain right here from like the back of the neck just digging in as you're getting in the upper register there. But no, it was good. It's pain is good. Makes you want it more, right?
Well, I think that the payoff with the pain of playing music is the beautiful sounds, hopefully, that are coming from it. That's enriches.
Eventually, they were.
Well, yeah, and well, like you said, you know what sounds good, so you also would know what sounds bad. I'd imagine.
Oh yeah. There wasn't any worries there.
Okay, so not to get too weird, but what's something that the fantasy community doesn't know about you yet? And we've talked a lot about music. We'll talk more about music later, so we'll let's pause on that for now on that disc.
Well, I'm actually going to unpause that because this is my damn interview. When I said all genres, I meant all. I used to be in a boy band. This was about 23, 24 years ago, and yeah, it's not exactly a commonly known fact amongst this community, but as I said before, be yourself because people can see through that horse stuff.
Facade? Okay. Sorry, I thought you were looking for a word. You knew as clear as mud what word you wanted to say. Okay,
I caught myself.
Thank you.
But yeah, that's probably the most or the least commonly known fact about me. And yeah, whatever. What do I got to hide at this point?
Boy band. So Backstreet Boys or NSYNC or no?
Backstreet Boys by far.
Okay.
They might not have been as glitzy, but they had the better songwriting, whoever was writing their songs for them. Which is probably the same guy that was doing the other ones.
I think I know as albums went on, the Backstreet Boys did actually write their own songs kind of progressively more and more. But yeah,
Yeah,
first
kind
two,
of like
three
the
albums.
Monkees.
Yeah. Funny how it all comes full circle back. Like
Manufactured pop, man. It's not a new thing, and it ain't going away.
whatever sells, right?
That's right.
All right. So you've taught, and this next question could literally go as large scope as all sorts of different pop bands could, because you mentioned Smoke Show, where you keep it as open as possible in terms of topic, content, and you could literally leave yourself open for anything. So if you could interview one person all time, and specifically on the Smoke Show, that does apply. You could do right there. Who would it want to be?
This was the hardest one out of this entire set to figure out because, oh my God, because of the format of my show, being open-ended, like you said there, like even the branding, there's nothing sports related or anything on here. That's just the avenue I chose to reach the shores with. But for one person all time, I don't know if I can narrow this down to even 10 people. I mean, if we're talking sports, someone like Michael Irvin, Bob Costas, or Roger Goodell, it would be scathing. We're talking like Barbara Walters on a bender. Music-wise, I mean, like Dimebag, Hendrix, Harrison, George, that is, Cornell, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Cliff Burton, Fleet, Victor Wooten. I mean, there's too many to name. On the intellectual side, classic polymaths like Ben Franklin or Da Vinci, guys like Tesla, Einstein, Hawking, Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, Ptolemy. I mean, I could go on and on forever. If I had my way, I would interview the world.
So Earth, how are you doing today? And just go up to the biggest mountain you could find.
Yes.
If you get the real trick is you kind of throw your voice, it bounces off the mountain, and that people think it's actually responding like that. If you could sonically, if you could control your voice, do that, that'd be pretty impressive, probably.
I could get there.
Eventually. But what is one revelation that eventually you got in your life that you wish you'd kind of thought or received sooner?
I hate to sound like the dad I am right now, but fiscal responsibility. If I had used all that money I made bartending for 15, 16 years for something productive, I'd be like, man, but I mean, I don't got a whole lot to show for it. But I do have my lovely guitars and, the other things that I guess came along with it and went, but what you gonna do? I live in a house with my lovely wife and my son that we own, and we own our cars. So like, I think we're doing all right now. It may have taken me 40 years to get there, but I got there.
Yeah, that's great. That's what counts, right? Is the family and the happiness. So
damn right, brother.
All right. So, and again, fantasy sports, fantasy football makes us happy. So we're gonna get to talking about the fantasy questions. So right off the bat. It's actually not question 1, it's question 0, because what are your thoughts on the concept and the strategy of zero RB?
You got to have a combination of 3 things: knowledge, patience, and metaphorical balls of steel. If you go in blind, just thinking that you can load up on every other position until round 10, you are sunk already. Read up on the strategy before attempting the strategy. I'm not against it, but I've never done it personally. The closest I've ever dabbled is Hero RB, and to be honest, I change my strategy every draft I'm in. It comes down to more reading the room and using your draft position to your advantage for myself.
You almost after the draft, you can kind of name, oh, this turned out to be this strategy. You didn't necessarily plan to go into it. If you build a zero RB team, it wasn't intentional. It's like, wow, there's just never any running backs I want to draft.
Well, I wouldn't say it's not intentional. You kind of read and react to what's going on, and then you see, after 3 or 4 rounds, okay, this is shaping up to be this sort of roster. Make sure you're building around this. This is the direction you could take your team in, and these are the things you should be doing while you're waiting to make your draft pick, instead of going at blah 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 blah. You're on the clock. Please make your pick. So be strategizing. Always be thinking, man. You're drafting not only for yourself, but you were drafting against other people. So yeah, when it comes down to it, use your draft position to your advantage. But know what you're doing while you're doing it. At the end of the draft, you shouldn't be going, oh, well, that kind of turned out to be this build, didn't it? You should be aware of what that build is way before you get to the end of that draft.
So there's a certain leverage point where you're going from just, okay, at the start, you're taking the best players that are available. You want the best value. And then at a certain point, you flip to roster construction, roster build more when you're making your picks, or is good balance of both throughout?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really nail it down, generally speaking, one way or another with that. For myself, it really depends on league settings, scoring settings, different rules that you're going by for this. Like, not every league is going to be the same scoring format. There might be positional advantages to some things. So when it comes to that, you have to know what that is before you go into that, because that's really going to inform where your priorities should be coming when it comes to the draft.
Well, perfect, because natural transition, because talking about league formats and scoring settings. So what is your preferred league format? We'll start there.
Well, as a Canadian, I love everybody. So when it comes to league formats, I love all positions and I want them all to matter in the draft. So for me, give me super flex and give me tight end premium. If we got a good crowd, independent defensive players as well, man. I love the more decisions, the more things that can throw a wrench into a draft, the better, because those kind of things, they make drafts so unpredictable when the top tiers get a bit engorged with more talent. I'm also a fan of the 6-point passing touchdowns for much the same reasons.
Okay, so with tight end premium specifically, is there a certain amount? So we're going to assume 1 point PPR for everyone else. What is the premium that you think becomes worth it but doesn't go overboard, if there is such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm in some that are insane. Like, we're talking every time a tight end gets a reception, it's 2.75 of a regular point. So, oh man, you got some premiums in that one. But for me, I mean, an extra half point makes sense. Anything from a half point to 3/4 of a point, I'm cool with that. Anything beyond that, I think it puts a bit too much of a premium on the really top tier ones, because there's going to be a collection of 4 or 5 guys that are kind of worth going early on that for.
Any thought to the start 2 tight end leagues? Because I've seen those as well.
I personally have not been in one yet, but that is not for a lack of trying. When all these leagues are starting up and everything, and we're putting all the different rules up to vote and everything like that, I am hammering the button to vote for 2 tight end. I want to try it. I mean, like I said, I like all positions to matter, and doing something like that, it's like making the tight end is, well, not really super flex. You got to play 2, but anyways, yeah, and well, I love tight ends, so.
I want to, just in terms of balance, I want to shout out Ruben on Twitter at SuperFlexDegen. He commissions a league I'm in, and the idea of very balanced scoring, Superflex, only start 1 tight end, but 1.75 premium, and wide receivers also get 1.25 per reception. Running backs just 1, so also put a little bit more emphasis on the wide receiver. But there's also 0.15 point per carry.
Okay.
So the idea of all that is to try and basically make everything balanced out. We did an auction actually for the startup, so that was again part of that. Everyone could spend their money as freely as they could in terms of the balanced scoring settings, not all towards one position.
Okay, I'm stealing the interview microphone for a second here. So who's your tight end in that league?
I overspent for George Kittle, and I think Tyler Higbee was the next guy I got. But looking back at the auction, the answer was Mark Andrews. He went for so cheap in the auction that it's a 24 team, so 2 copies. Both copies of Andrews were ridiculously too cheap. So those 2 managers did pretty great to get them.
Yep, not a bad play. Not a bad play at all.
I know obviously, like, again, Superflex, I think the 10 most expensive players, or I guess the 20 most expensive players, were the 2 copies of the top 10 quarterbacks. And I think the only 2 other players to go over $200 were Darren Waller and Kyle Pitts. So kind of there was big spending up on the elite tight ends, and I'm sure the person who spent up on the 2 people who spent up on Waller are not so happy with those returns. So felt a little better about Kittle that didn't quite spend up to where Waller was, but again, still looking back, Andrews was the answer there. So but that's the way it goes.
I love Kittle, man. He might be my favorite player real life in the league, man. There's no one that like the enthusiasm that I bring to a podcast or an interview or something like that. That's like the equivalent of him on the field, just pancaking a dude and laughing the whole way down. I see those plays and I just see a kindred spirit. Like George Kittle is my spirit animal.
Animal, yeah, that's a good way to put it, right? But well, it's funny because you talk about how you feel like you're living 5 different lives. Is that where you get all the energy from?
Well, yeah, that and this, but it's just naturally kind of there too. Like what we've alluded to several times with, the Smoke Show. Whenever I'm making a podcast appearance or anything like that, in order to get me to kind of focus a bit more, I'm pretty towed up by the time I get on here. You wouldn't really know it by the way I am, but that's just how I focus. But no, I'm just naturally pretty off the wall.
If you feel like you've built up a tolerance at this point, so to speak.
More or less.
But just back to Kittle real quick. I mean, he
Yeah.
kind of offers something in terms of a yards after the catch, where an ability where you can kind of he really could score from anywhere in the field, and not a lot of tight ends really have that. And it seems like the very few that don't get the same type of targets he does. So even if he's not seeing the same amount of targets as a Travis Kelce or Darren Waller 2 years ago, he still could kind of finished as the tight end one kind of on any given week. So I think that kind of definitely gives him an edge at that position where it's really scarce too.
Absolutely. So if Debo holds out, how are your shares of him feeling then? Or if Debo gets traded, God forbid.
Yeah, I mean, I think, because I've spent so much on him. I've invested when his price was higher. So the one thing about Kittle, though, now would be a really good time to buy him if you're going into startups and if you're, looking in redraft leagues. So it's unfortunate that I've already got too much of him, but if he's that much cheaper this year, you've got to keep buying more. But yeah, would be even if maybe even right now the threat of Debo going out, though, maybe that's making his price creep up, and maybe that does make him a good sell in a sense. So who knows? Yes, it could go either way with him at this point in terms of like, is he a buy, is he a sell? Maybe a bit of both. Buy in certain leagues, sell in others, where you find that those price. A lot of times, that's kind of where the nuance is in Dynasty, especially is if you can play in enough leagues, is to figure out which leagues based on the settings you want to roster players in, and try and leverage to trade them away in others.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so scoring settings, I guess, again, natural transition. So talked about your favorite format.
Yes.
But is there any specific settings beyond the format top? And I guess you did talk about scoring settings in there too, but maybe settings kind of outside the scoring. I know one for myself is I don't want trade vetoes. Like, to me, it's the absence of trade vetoes, the setting that I absolutely must have. But is there anything particular with fantasy leagues that you want in your leagues?
Well, I mean, when I was thinking scoring with it, I just said PPR. I refuse to go back to the dark ages. Half still doesn't cut it for me. Full PPR or nothing. But
I can tolerate half more than I can, but I don't want the zero. But
nah, it's like drinking skim milk, man. What's the pleasure? You're just drinking white water, man.
God, that makes it sound bad. But let's get to the good then. So all-time fantasy QB 1, running back 1, wide receiver 1, and tight end 1. So best of the best fantasy for you so far.
Okay, so these are going to be a lot more recent players, as they were more kind of relevant to when I became more of a serious fan of the game and not just, a diehard Cowboys fan. So QB1, my large adult son, Lamar Jackson. Now, he was someone I remember gushing about to my coworkers when he was still in Louisville. Like, he was so enthralling to watch. Go back. If you have never seen his highlight reel from back then, go and watch it. It's ridiculous. Not a paradigm breaker, but a paradigm shifter for sure. The question was it going to translate to the NFL? And I was firmly in the camp. I did not waver on that it would. And Baltimore was smart enough to build around his skill set for him to succeed. And I love my large adult son, Lamar. He's my favorite. He's just such a good human, man. Like, you see him in interviews and everything. Like, how can you not love that kid? Like, it's impossible not to.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. And, was the QB1 overall just 3 seasons ago now. So,
his ceiling is ridiculous.
And if you had him like that year, not only was he QB1, but he was just like a wide margin where it really was a difference maker relative to everyone else too. So if you had a team with McCaffrey and Lamar on like that year, that would have been insane. But so we'll get to, speaking of McCaffrey, get to all-time running back one.
Okay, so my all-time RB1. I've had some great seasons playing fantasy, a couple bad seasons, but it wasn't until the drafting of Jonathan Taylor in 2020 that brought me my first championship. And that year, my three-headed attack of JT, Aaron Jones, and Miles Sanders was not to be denied. I ended up getting Sanders for free off the waiver wire right towards the end of the season before he absolutely turned it on heading into playoffs there. And it was... Yes, Lamar telling Schefter, oh my God, I was crying, laughing so hard. Absolutely agree with that one, Garrison, man. But yeah, it was great having that three-headed attack. I've never really been a robust RB type, but that year I tried it out, and I'll be damned if I didn't get that championship, man. And it was against the guy I'd been to the finals 3 years in a row. This is my home league we're talking about here, against the same guy, and lost the first 2 times. The first time I lost, I did the calculations. There was literally not a single lineup I could have set to win that game. I can live with that.
They had the better team. Like it was always going to be their championship as long as their team didn't implode.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The second year, I did the calculations. If I had not made some last minute lineup changes, I ruxined myself. I would have won the championship that year, and I will never forget that lesson. Don't last minute tinker if you don't need to. Trust you guys, I got you there. Anyways, year 3 in a row against him, I hammered him. I had Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert in at quarterback. I had JT, Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders. I had George Kittle in at tight end, and then just a bunch of scrubs like Robbie Anderson and stuff like that to fill in wide receiver and flex. But oh man, I was not denied that year. I just tore that league apart. And that was the year I became a content creator in the offseason before that. And that's when I feel I really leveled up.
and this is 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's like Robbie Anderson's career year. Like what didn't he, like he caught a ton of passes with Carolina. So, and assuming you're playing in a full PPR league, that would have been, even him as a scrub would have been pretty good. I feel like I won a title in 2020 as well. I think a George Kittle, Mark Andrews led team with Robbie Anderson potentially as the wide receiver 1 on the team. And it's like, well, if he caught enough passes to do that. Good old Robbie.
Absolutely.
Right when you needed him. The one year you really needed him to come.
Yeah, he came through, man.
Because most of the people who rostered him were probably never even close to championships.
No. But while we're on the subject of wide receivers, let's move on to my wide receiver 1. And for this one, let's go left field out of this one. The best value in drafts, because how can one guy be this productive regardless of changing circumstances year over year over year? Mr. Brandon Cooks. These are the gold that you mine in drafts that turn into championships. You know, let's toast the underdog. I could put up T.O. here. I could put up Moss here. I could put up any of those guys. But you know what? Brandon Cooks, man, give this guy his due. Completely underrespected and underappreciated. But man, you grab him late in drafts every year and he comes through every damn time. Yes. Yeah.
That's true. Who doesn't love the value of Brandon Cooks? And who doesn't love Robbie Anderson? Well, Gerson has the answer. Baker Mayfield doesn't love Robbie Anderson. So we don't really do a news segment here, but I guess that wasn't even really news. It's more rumors, but I guess it's not a secret that the Carolina Panthers have been trying to improve their quarterback situation for the last 2 years. And, maybe was Baker Mayfield potentially going to the Panthers? Well, if that was the case of it maybe happening, Robbie Anderson almost made it seem like it won't now. I mean, unless, of course, they just cut Robbie Anderson and bring in Baker. So I guess Robbie doesn't want to play with Baker. Robbie does want to play with Colin Kaepernick, though. So we'll see. Stay tuned.
I'm down with it, man. Bring Cap back.
I mean, he hasn't.
Smoke Show is on that side.
Here's the thing: he has not played football now in 6 years. Like, how rusty is he going to be? How prepared is he going to be? Like, I don't know. Like, it could be probably it seems like really good physical shape. So like, and the mental side of the game, he definitely has that. And that's not just going to disappear. But I definitely have concerns about his readiness to play. But still feel like if he showed up, he's the week 1 starter automatically because Sam Darnold is so awful that you'll take the chance with the guy that hasn't played in 6 years, I think.
Sam Darnold started games last year. Cam Newton started games last year. There are bum-ass quarterbacks in this league that are legit starters, and I would take Cap over every single damn one of them. I don't care how long he's been away. He is better than most of these guys, humans. So
I will say Cam, it's
I'm
the
all right
only
with that.
reason Cam's a bum now is just because the injuries. Like, it just seems like his body's broken down. But I think
when you play like a linebacker playing quarterback in combination with a running back, yeah, that physical play style is going to break your body down. You're not playing like Lamar out there where you're elusive, but like you're just running head on into contact.
Considering that that shoulder and then that the lackluster throwing there now, which again, injury we can blame it all you want, but yeah, the end result is I think I would also rather have Kaepernick now than Cam Newton. I agree there.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so almost right, and I guess I will end with a tight end one there. Sorry,
Kyle Anthony Pitts. Next question.
Oh, I'm almost shocked it wasn't. I thought you'd say George Kittle, honestly.
No, it's become kind of a signature of mine. Anytime on Twitter I see someone talking about Pitts or asking a question that involves Pitts in some manner, I post a video that goes, Kyle Anthony Pitts, next question. Or if someone has got him in a trade, it's, you got Pitts, you won. But I love, if there's one player that you could be synonymously known with as a fan, as a content creator, anything like that, my guy is Kyle Anthony Pitts.
Probably still higher upside than my guy, which would be Jermichael Hasty. So yeah, maybe you tied yourself to a little bit of a higher potential. Tough, yeah. 4th overall pick, undrafted free agent. Yeah, I wonder who's going to have the more upside. But speaking of Pitts, like okay, let's get to some Kyle Pitts questions just in terms of approach. Trades could go anywhere. So let's talk about drafting and approaching and drafting. So from a dynasty perspective, how early are you taking Pitts? Single quarterback or super flex. I suppose the only difference there is like how many quarterbacks you're taking ahead of him in super flex. So where would you have him going in a dynasty startup?
Quite honestly, I'm taking him in the first round, regardless of where I am.
Okay.
That is how deep my belief is in him. My exposure to him in Dynasty right now has got to be sitting around probably 65-70% at this point. If I haven't drafted him, I've traded for him. If I haven't traded for him, I've been seating in a corner, figuring out how I can pry him from your hands, because I want 100% of Kyle Anthony Pitts.
All right, fair enough. Because I was gonna say, like in formats where like a 2 tight end league, like he would almost seem like a real good candidate to be the 101, even if you're not a huge Kyle Pitts truther. Like even myself, who's maybe a Kyle Pitts hater, I like Kyle Thunder more than Kyle Pitts. Apparently, that's just me. I'm sorry, Josh. We've been
Elizabeth. I'm coming.
We've been so in lockstep, but I guess I sank that chance. But like even myself, like if start 2 tight ends, like it's Josh Allen, Mahomes, Herbert are off the board, I'll probably go Kyle Pitts. Like I'm not like I'm usually typically the super flex. I want those elite quarterbacks, but as much as I love Lamar, if you have to start 2 tight ends and that scarcity is there, I probably would take Pitts ahead of Lamar.
Oh, 100%.
And hope Josh is in the league and then look to trade him to Josh for a haul.
It's not a bad move, I tell you. I have overpaid several times, we will say.
To be fair, like it seems like he's the kind of guy that if you're going to acquire them, you have to overpay. Like elite assets, like a Jonathan Taylor, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, or again those elite quarterbacks in super flex leagues. You're not getting them without an overpay.
Well, it depends. I find with enough negotiation, enough back and forth, everything like that, at some point, I think anyone is pretty gettable. But from what I've seen over the last year, Kyle Pitts and Jamar Chase are nearly impossible to get for anything less than a king's ransom. And good on them, man. I'm not giving up Pitts. You have to pry him from my cold, dead hands for you to ever get Pitts off any of my rosters. I would have a hard time getting rid of Chase as well. I ended up getting both of them in one of my big Dynasty drafts last year, so I'm pretty happy about that one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Because the production value with Chase is already there. I believe he was wide receiver 5 last year, so the production value is already matching the trade value, market value,
draft cost, anything. Yeah,
no, for sure. Clearly already top 5. Top 5 for Chase just last year in terms of production. Definitely, probably both top 5 in, say, non-quarterbacks in Superflex or just like the top 5 picks in a 1 QB league. Like you'll see both Pitts and Chase in the top 5 and the top 4. So to get both in the same team is pretty good. But speaking of top 5, we're gonna get to the high 5 portion of the show. It isn't just called that for you, Josh. maybe it's called that way for me, but yeah,
on brand, baby.
So top 5 of 5 different categories, not 4, not 20. Although 4 times 5 is 20. So we're going to start, read into that however you want, because we will start with the top 5 books. So top 5 books you read.
Okay, so top 5 books. Number 5, we have The Music Lesson. This is by a bass player named Victor Wooten. And first of all, he's a phenomenal bass player. But it is... I don't know how to describe this book. I don't know if the events in this book actually happen or not. It's kind of this weird spiritual thing where this stranger just shows up at his apartment door one day. And I don't, just check out this book. It's called The Music Lesson, a spiritual search for growth through music. It's captivating. Number 4. We have This Is Your Brain on Music. And this is all about the relationship of neuroscience to music and different regions of the brain and everything like that. Super, super fascinating stuff. If I had, like I said, if I had more time in my life for, life number 6 or whatever it is, I would be totally a neuroscientist. I find it fascinating. But anyways, yeah, that book, super, super interesting. This one, big classic here. The first part of the 3-part Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. This is Dante's Inferno. Famous for inventing the 3-line stanza, terza rima. Just the vivid depictions that he came up with during this time. They're shocking. I mean, you look at the album art behind me there, Machine Head from The Blackening, and that is a picture inspired by the Divine Comedy of the Inferno part of it.
Well, music influences and artistic influences. How many fantasy football team names have been called Devontae's Inferno or something, right? Like the fantasy football influences in that book are insane too, right? And Smokey Nelson, I'm sure there's something there too.
Actually, quick little sidebar here. That name comes from one of my music projects I was doing back probably 12 years ago now. I was writing just some blues songs. It was just fun. I was using this like really gravelly voice, almost like Mark Lanigan style. And
rest in peace.
Absolutely. That one was a terrible, terrible one. Check out the WTF podcast interview with him. Mark Maron and him. Oh man, that was a beauty. He reposted just after he passed. But anyways, yeah, it was this kind of weird departure project. And like I said, I was using this raspy voice. And I ended up recording with this 54-year-old harmonica player who was a underground parking lot MMA instructor. I know this is the weirdest sidebar. But anyways, he would come over and buy things off my roommate at the time. And we would just chill and everything. He was just like the most interesting man in the world, but actually real. And he always had his harmonica on him for some reason. And I was recording a song one day, and I laid down the guitar, laid down the vocals, and I'm like, "You want to put some harmonica on this? It would be perfect." And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So we go outside, do our thing, come back in, and we start recording it. And we finish the song up, and I let him listen to it, and he's like, "Man, your voice sounds like Smokey Hell." And I was like, "Ooh, Ooh, I like that.
I'm keeping that.
I like that. So from then on,
Yeah.
Gary Barker, absolutely love you, buddy. I hope you're doing well. He christened me Smokey Hell, and that's kind of stuck ever since.
I will say, having a harmonica, I guess the advantage is that you can take it everywhere, to be fair. So why not take it everywhere?
Yes. So that was book number 3 there. Number 2. This one I remember doing back in high school for a book report style project. I ended up doing a song about it. And it's super short, super short. It's called Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Racial overtones of not good things aside, it's been very inspirational. It's a very deep journey in metaphorically and literally into the dark corners of your psyche. It was the inspiration behind the movie Apocalypse Now. That's all about this. They just kind of translated it from colonial Africa to the Vietnam War. But yeah, very much worth a read. Super short, but oh man, it's dark, and that kind of helped me unlock that one of those corners of me that, you know, I guess eventually leads to being called Smokey Hell. Last book, number 1. How Music Works by David Byrne. And yes, that is David Byrne from the Talking Heads. Our house. Those guys. He's brilliant. I don't know how to put this any differently. This is the most brilliantly written book I've ever, like, it goes over the scientific acoustic properties of European classical theater houses to like the animal kingdom and how music is through there. It's just crazy. It's kind of like me. It's everywhere at once, but man, you get to the end of it, you learn so much, and he just has a really cool way of presenting things. But yeah, probably my favorite book right there.
Proof that music is everywhere, right? Like that's one of the most large scope topics that kind of can relate to anywhere in any culture, even if different, you know, you have different types of notation. You know, the 12 note chromatic system doesn't necessarily exist in all cultures, right? But the idea is you can still listen to music from anywhere and still understand the grasp the concept of the sounds you're hearing and the rhythmic properties of everything being played together. So
it is the universal language. I don't care how much of a trope that sounds like. It's absolutely true.
And I will say This Is Your Brain on Music. My wife has that book. I thought I recognized as soon as you pulled it up, but yeah, that's
it's a good one, man. It you got to dedicate some time to it though. It's one of the only books I have that I have to reread pages.
That's okay. Means it's just so much worth reading, right?
100%. It's just some heavy concepts.
And then we'll get to the more music stuff in a sec. We'll first get to top 5 movies.
Yes, sir. All right. Let's start this off. Number 5, the most recent addition to this, Zack Snyder's Justice League. If you saw, what is it? The second shelf on that bookshelf, it's full of comics, mostly Green Lantern, mostly Batman. But yeah, I'm a DC guy. I have been ever since I found my first comic, which was the Silver Age era telling of the formation of the Justice League and all their stories and how they got into it. And that captivated me. I was always into, well, like I said, Green Lantern and Batman were my top 2. But when Zack Snyder put them on screen, 4 hours of just blistering, like, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life to see pulled off, and he did it. And I don't care if it never happens again, if they don't get him back or whatever. I'm not going to dive into that, resurrect the Snyderverse or anything like that, you Twitter maniacs. But I will say this is definitely the most recent movie to pop into my top 5. It's so good. It's just a lifelong fulfillment.
I'm curious now. Green Lantern, I guess maybe not. That's not so surprising now that I think about it. But who's your favorite of the Green Lanterns, especially the human, this main?
Ooh, okay, good question. For myself, I'm actually a big Kyle Rayner guy.
Oh, same here.
Yes, he really spoke to
not
me.
Just the name.
Yeah,
because again, I hate Kyle Pitt, so it's not just the name bias. I swear.
Balance within the force. But no, he always kind of spoke to me. He was kind of like the Raphael of that group of human lanterns. He was kind of wisecracking. He had the 90s attitude. I mean, the first panel you ever see him in, well, I shouldn't say the first panel because there was a beach scene with Alex, but the first panel you see him in with Ganthet, he's wearing a 9 Inch Nails shirt. And I'm like, yes, I relate to this so much. And so he was always the guy, and he was always artistic. The way that, especially guys like Ethan Van Sciver drew him, it was just so beautiful. He was always the most artistic and the most kind of always refining his constructs and everything like that. So yeah, he was definitely my favorite, and his arc too. You know, becoming like the torchbearer. He was more, in my books, he was more legendary start to beginning than Hal Jordan, and I'll put my goddamn name on that.
I've got the Iron Torchbearer book here. I just can't find it, but I'll pull it up on screen because I'm inspired by the way you do it. But yeah, but again, artistic, right? Because all the other main Green Lanterns, they're all soldiers, and he's the only one that is an artist, right? I kind of like that, and I liked his costume the most too. I think it just the way it looks.
Okay, which of his costumes did you like the best? For me, Ion, man. When he had his stint as Ion there, it was unbelievable. Like just the little arm details underneath the shoulder and the boots, like it was just a perfect look.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm trying to pull it up now so people can see it.
Okay, but we'll continue on to my top 5 here. So at number 4, while we're doing that, Interstellar. Now,
yeah,
I have a voracious appetite for information, and as you've kind of probably told from this interview, it spans in every corner. Yeah. Oh, that's such a beauty costume. Like that's I love that.
Yeah,
that's wicked. Sure. And like the celestial notes on the black part and the torso, they're very reminiscent of the Oblivion character that he wrote. That actually manifested itself with, anyways, we won't get into that storyline, but anyways, cool ass costume. But yeah, Interstellar, that kind of speaks to the more scientific curiosities that I have, deals with a lot of, fourth, fifth dimension type stuff, gravity and all that thing. But I just thought it was brilliantly done, beautiful effects in that movie, and Christopher Nolan's just an absolute master of movie making, in my opinion. I love everything he does.
Yeah, I do have a friend of mine, and that is their favorite Christopher Nolan film. I know maybe it wouldn't be my choice, but hard to argue against it because it is so masterfully done.
No, just beautiful. And I love things that are kind of near future things, kind of like Black Mirror, things that could happen in like a relatively recently short time. Yeah, number 3. Not a single person watching this will have heard of this movie. And if they do, please hit me up at Smokey Hell NFL on Twitter. I just want to shake your hand because this movie is from 1933 and it's called Duck Soup. You may have heard of
Marx Brothers, right?
Yes. God, I love you. I love you too, Josh. This is a Marx Brothers movie, and in my opinion, it is the pinnacle of what they were able to accomplish. And I mean, you look at modern comedy on screen, it all comes from the Marx Brothers. They were the transition from vaudeville into motion pictures, and the zany antics were just so beautiful. And like the wordplay of Groucho Marx, he could sit there and undress you verbally and you wouldn't even know it. They were the lines were so brilliantly written. A lot of them Irv Berling, I think, back then. Anyways, it was amazing. And that was the last film that they did that had all 4 of the original brothers in there. Zeppo didn't really do the movies after that. I think he went more into management. But anyways, it was brilliant. It was a satire on the rise of fascism in Europe at that time. And just some of the scenes are just so brilliant. I keep a copy on my phone and have ever since you were able to put like memory cards into your phone and stuff like that. Because if I ever need to just watch that, I will just throw on Duck Soup. It is only, God, it's probably only just over an hour long, maybe an hour and 13 minutes, but it's just brilliant. Satire, hilarity. Anyone could love that movie. It's just brilliant.
And 90 years later, it's not like it doesn't apply.
Exactly, the relevance is still there, and it's so sad.
Unfortunately, crazy that they could see it coming even before it was super evident to the whole world too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was 6 years before Hitler started really getting his rise and everything like that. But anyways, yeah, moving on to number 2 here, another Christopher Nolan movie, and it's probably not the one you're thinking of. It's Inception.
Yeah.
Now,
Actually, it was the one I was thinking of because
good.
well, just because of number 5, you're talking about this is the ultimate comic book movie, right? So I figured this wouldn't be Dark Knight, and this would also probably be my answer for favorite Christopher Nolan movie too. So a little bit lockstep there.
Oh, absolutely. Just it was so mind-bending that the cast. I mean, well,
Oh yeah,
I mean, a lot of them are just Christopher Nolan's regular troupe, you could call them, but it was just so brilliant. The rewatch value of it is insane. You pick up new things every time you watch it. It is just it's a masterpiece in my opinion. It's just an absolute. There's no. I can't find fault in it. And that's hard for me.
This is an original concept, like not based off anything, right? And I mean, Interstellar, the same thing. So just like the brilliant mastery of the concept of Christopher Nolan, but like he really does kind of create a whole dream universe in this. So like the depth of the concept he created behind this is insane. As like some of the creations worlds that were featured in the movie, the depth of it, the scope of it, right? It's he kind of really does a deep end, like you're saying, all the details within every piece of dialogue, every scene shown that you might not catch right away, but it's there for a reason. That and it's also proof that any movie that's worth watching is at least worth watching twice, because you almost have to watch every scene kind of knowing what's already going to happen afterwards. Like, how does this fit into where the movie ends? So if you think a movie's good, watch it twice at least, and if it, or 100 times if it's good enough. But like at least give yourself that. Where if a movie's worth watching, it's worth watching twice.
Absolutely. And the number 1 spot, this is a movie I have watched over 100 times. I remember this is one of the few movies I've ever been in the theater and been in like one of the front rows for, because it was so packed. We got there a little bit late. This was back in high school. It came out in 2000, so but I remember the exact seat I was sitting in, and the opening scene of this movie is an outdoor, just dirty, muddy battlefield. And the dialogue, the music, like my hair, the hair on the back of my neck is standing up right now as I'm just putting myself back into my year 2000 body, sitting 5 seats over in the second row on the left side of the theater, watching Gladiator for the first time. And everything about that movie spoke to me. It was just it solidified Russell Crowe as one of my favorite modern actors. It just everything about it was just so beautifully done, and the links that they went to make this movie, to recreate the Colosseum. I mean, like, all these things were just so the scope was just incredible, and the depth of his vision that he pulled off, Ridley Scott there, and it was just, I mean, kudos. Like I said, I've literally watched that movie over 100 times. I will never, ever get sick of it. I could literally watch it every day.
And I'm pretty sure we've definitely had that as the number 1 answer before, dating back to last season.
Yeah,
watched that far back. I believe episode 3 from season 1, if I remember correctly. Maybe it's been named before or since that as well, but at least one other time it's been the number 1 movie. So Gladiator, when you say 2000 muddy battle scene dialogue music, I was almost thinking, okay, is this Lord of the Rings? But you said 2000, not 2001, so it's kind of that was the hint there. That was the all right. So Now we'll get to the ending portion. We'll rock our way out of this. So start with top 5 artists and bands.
This was so incredibly hard for me. I had to make the answers kind of more well-known ones, because they were such staples and influences to myself, as well as the fact that you go on my phone right now. Like I said, I keep a memory card in every phone I've had since you could, and there are certain albums that will not leave that. They'll be there every single time, and every one of these artists is one of those albums. So Metallica, I mean, that's like this. James Hetfield is probably one of the biggest influences to my guitar playing. Big rhythm, big stuff like that. I just absolutely love it. Pantera, Dimebag was the whole reason I picked up a guitar in the first place. I mean, I got to show you this one guitar of mine.
It's funny because based just on the headstock, I knew that was the one he was going for.
So this guitar here, it used to be, if we have time for a small interjection, just going to flash it a couple times on screen here. So when I originally bought that guitar, I think I got it for, price tag's still in the back of the neck. I think $280, straight MLX model Dean. It was just wood grain, nothing fancy whatsoever. That diamond plated steel pick guard was not on there. Fast forward 2010. So I was living in the house with my friend who sold my other friends some things, and our other roommate. All three of us were musicians. And so we had this huge open living room that literally all of our instruments lived in. All my, like, I have probably a dozen different guitars, basses, ukulele, mandolin, violin, all that crap. Those were all there in my corner of the room. My other roommate had his 3 guitars and his amps in one spot. And then we had the drums at the far end by the big bay window. And we would just, be jamming in there all the time. And so one night, blackout drunk. Wake up the next day. And I'm walking out of my bedroom towards the kitchen, and something is gnawing in the back of my head. It's like, hey, dummy, go look at your guitar. And I just had this feeling in my stomach that just like the worst just pit in there. And I go over and I look and I just, oh no, the volume and tone knobs completely pushed into the body of the guitar. It looked like it had at least suffered a major fall. And so I'm like, oh no, like what happened? And so my other roommate wakes up, the guitar player. He's like, dude, you don't remember? And he's like, I'm actually not surprised by this. So what happened was we were just, doing our thing, drinking and smoking, playing music till the wee hours in the morning. And apparently mid-song, I'm sitting there playing the guitar and all of a sudden just boom, fall straight forward, landing on the guitar, which pushed all those things and the pickups in there. So I had to take it to my guy who works at Tom Lee Music, which is kind of like our music world or wherever the hell it is down there, Guitar Center. And I was like, please help me. I'll buy a couple new pickups and everything. So I put a dime bucker in the neck and a Seymour Jazz 59 pickup in the, the 59 Jazz pickup in the bridge and the dime bucker in the neck. And then he created me the diamond plated steel pick guard there to kind of hide where the damage was. And then did another input jack plate in the same thing to match it. And then I repainted the whole thing on there. So everything you see on that's all my hand. Put new machine heads on there and everything like that. But yeah, dime bag was the whole reason I picked up a guitar in the first place. And that was one of my first. So yeah, well, a little sidebar there.
That was as long and epic as a dime bag solo. So
you're right. Not quite as musical though. Anyways, I digress. Number 3, Tool. It's hard to find a band that's been more influential on me in every facet of the band. Well, except for drumming, I couldn't hold a candle or a drumstick to Danny Carey. But all the other things, Maynard's probably my second biggest influence when it comes to vocals. Adam Jones is a big influence. A lot of my rhythm tracks are very kind of rhythm based, Tool wise. Justin Chancellor, oh my God, probably the biggest influence on bass. He's the reason I picked one up in the first place. Yeah, I can't say enough good stuff about him. I've seen them live a couple times, and I've been real close on the sides, right close to Justin Chancellor there, and I was just hypnotized the whole time. Like, oh my God, look up this guy. They are phenomenal. If you don't know Tool, like, first of all, where have you been hiding since 1993? But yeah, figure your life out and listen to Tool.
And I think with Justin Chancellor, he was almost the missing ingredient to take them to the next level, right?
100%. Because Paul Diamore, or Diamore, I don't know how you say his last name. He was good. He kept it kind of rhythm, but he didn't stand out. It didn't give that missing dimension that a guy, the level of musician that Justin Chancellor is, could bring into that. And maybe it was his English background, growing up with all the other greats and stuff like that, but he unlocked the final the final boss of Tool, we'll say, and just made them the powerhouse that they are.
Like, I think they weren't necessarily always using 4/4, but it seems like pushing the different time signatures really started, especially on Lateralis. You hear that a lot, but like the idea
Oh,
of
absolutely.
the bass, if there's a guitar riff going on, the bass will come sometimes double what the riff's doing. But I think with them, it's the all invert it and kind of do you go upward, I go down kind of thing. Like those type of relations between Adam Jones and Justin Chance. So those really start coming once Justin's in the band. So yeah, it definitely is. I think what puts them up to the upper echelon to where they're a top 5 band for you. And I would agree with myself as well. So yeah, I love Tool.
Yeah. So there's only 2 that kind of come in above this, and the whole list was hard to put together, like I said, but I'm going to make these all accessible for people. It's Alice in Chains. And through both kind of eras of the band, we will say, there's nothing that I don't like. They are so unique. You can lump them in with the quote unquote Seattle sound, but none of those bands sound the same. I never got where this came from. There was kind of a general feeling of malaise over it because of kind of the tempo, the pacing. It was a little doomy, a little sludgy, but the harmonies. Jerry Cantrell is one of my favorite people of all time. Like he'd probably be right at the top for that. When you were asking me who I wanted to interview, he'd be right near the top because, oh man, Jerry, and he's a big fantasy football
guy.
I know.
He's in the Scott Fish Bowl every year, and I'm pretty sure he was in the Alice in Chains division.
I don't know who was actually playing it. Their manager was the guy that was officially in it. Mark, I can't remember his name, but I was in that division, and I requested that division specifically because I figured one of them might be playing in it. So I kind of played the odds.
And you love to play their songs too, of course.
Oh my god, they're just the greatest. Guitar wise, he's one of my biggest influences, man.
Like, he's a great songwriter. Like some of my favorite Alice in Chains songs are Jerry written. So
100%, and he might not be the quote unquote front man, even though in my opinion he really is, because he's been the foundation since the beginning. And the songwriting wouldn't be anywhere without his element in it. And the harmonies and everything like that. But even his solo stuff, like he just put out a new solo album recently and it's beautiful. Like it sounds like he's in a good place in his life right now. It's really coming through in his songwriting. You just feel happy for the guy. It's like, good for you, man.
That's awesome.
But number 1, the whole thing that made me become a musician in the first place was back in 1994 when I heard the opening notes of Black Hole Sun. And then I heard the guy who was singing it. And there has been no bigger influence to me as a musician than Chris Cornell. Vocal wise, he has absolutely been who I've patterned my own stuff after. His range is what I use to practice for the most part. It's just his esoteric lyric writing, the multiple meanings, the hidden layers and everything. It was just, it's brilliant. I remember an interview back in the Audio Slave days with Tim Comerford, the bass player, and they were talking about Like a Stone. And he was saying like, oh, this is like, a relationship song. I was really digging that. And he's like, he was asking, like, I'm paraphrasing here, it might not be the exact same, but he was asking Cornell like, oh, is this a relationship song, blah blah blah. He's like, no, this is an old man sitting in his home waiting to die. And it's like, oof, like there's so many, like, art is all about how you interpret it, but like the meaning that is actually there originally, like it's some dark stuff. And you kind of wonder, like, yeah, he always had his stuff to battle with, and it eventually, in combination with other things, led to his demise. And it's tragic and it's terrible, but at least we have everything that he did to that point to remember, to listen to influence you, to just remember him with.
Well, and I think, again, part of it, art being tied to the individual and everything the individual is, unfortunately, all the negative emotions feeding into the beauty of the art. Apparently, like, his depression in his teenage years is really bad. That he claims, I read an interview, that he spent an entire year basically not leaving his house and basically just listening to the Beatles. Mm-hmm. And it was there he learned everything he needed to vocally, melody, harmony, all the aspects of, like you're saying, like practicing his range, like what he was for you, kind of the Beatles were for him. So unfortunately, if he had been maybe happier, he might not have dove so high into the music as well. So it's unfortunate that, that's kind of the tortured existence was so tied to the things that made him happy and that contributed to make the rest of us so happy.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, those are the big five for me.
Well, yeah, great bands that we can always, I suppose, Chris Cornell, everything he did, right? Soundgarden, Audioslave, all the solo stuff, a bit like Jerry Cantrell, like it's incredible. But now we get to more of the specific instruments. So it's all about the strings, right? Whether it's 4 or 6, I guess you can.
Sir.
I've seen 8-string basses, to be honest, so you can have all numbers on either. But we're gonna go top 5 bass lines.
No, it was really hard for me to narrow these things down. Like I said, some of my influences, like Metallica, Cliff Burton, it was hard to pick something because he brought the theory aspect of music to Metallica. He was very classically trained, and he brought a lot of those things into the band, and it made it so amazing. Like you listen to the intro for Whom the Bell Tolls off Ride the Lightning, and that's not a guitar playing, that's him. That's him playing with his damn fingers, and that like to come into a song with such power, to be led by a bass, that was so influential for me because I like, you can't see it in the frame right here, but right over there is a 6-string bass, and that's one of my favorite instruments to play. And one of my solo projects was built all around the bass being a lead instrument, which is why I bought a 6-string. But that he's big influence for me on that because he was just so next level when it came to that, especially when it came to the scene of thrash metal, when you kind of look at these guys as knuckle dragging Neanderthals. But he was just so brilliant in his Canadian tuxedo every day up on stage.
Yeah, the jean jacket, that's for sure.
Oh,
like you're saying, like the theory, like I think where it really came through is Metallica doing longer songs and more progressive structures. I think he really fed into what functioned well, because I mean, and Justice for All, there's tons of that where the songs are a lot longer, but I also think that album there's lacking, I mean, the bass, but that's a mixing problem. That's a mixing problem, not a writing problem. But compositionally, I find that sometimes it's just like they're jumping from complicated riff to complicated riff without it really meshing well. Like I think the song and Justice for All is probably a good example of that, right? Whereas like with Cliff, it's the dynamics of the composition. I think to Orion, for instance, that's one I'll always go to.
Yes. And that's another one that I would say is one of my favorites to have, because if you listen to isolated bass tracks during the bass breakdown there, that part there, he actually double tracks the bass. So he's playing 2 different bass riffs at the same time during that part. It's beautiful. If you can find the isolated tracks, they're not hard. Go to YouTube.
And then the bass solo at the end, you can tell that there's 2 different tracks. There's one when he puts the wah pedal on, and that's quite an epic track.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's the period where James's voice isn't as refined. So it's maybe not a coincidence that the best song on that album is the instrumental one.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. But another big one, John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin, big influence from me, but kind of a big influence from him wasn't even to do with Led Zeppelin. It was a more recent band that he was in. A rock supergroup, if you want to call it, them Crooked Vultures. You knew where I was going. But some of the stuff that he does on that album is mind blowing. Like he uses a 12-string bass on some of those songs. He does a lot of the mandolin work on there, and like that's a trippy album to begin with. Just a collection of the behemoths of metal. But just listen to some of his bass work on that. It's just beautiful. Like it eclipses some of the stuff that he did with Zeppelin.
All right. Any one bass line that stands out from them Crooked Vultures?
I would say the ones that stand out would be the whole first half of the album, but the second half of the album, that's where it just gets into like a total trip fest. So like it gets really cool, but the first half of the album so cool rhythmically and everything like that. Some really cool lines that go into it.
So them Crooked Vultures only one album, but with him, Josh Homme, and David Grohl, then, right?
So far,
right, of course.
Yeah, I'm really hoping they get another one at some point, and with the unfortunate recent happenings in Foo Fighters, it might not be a terrible time. We know Dave Grohl does not know how to stay still, kind of like me, so he's gonna be doing something during this time. It's
for sure.
Another big one, Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath. Oh, baby! That intro for War Pigs is just like the only thing that's coming from Naomi, who's like one of the best ever. It's just ding, 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 ding. But his ding, 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 ding. It's so melodic, and
the bass is the one that's moving around, whereas the guitar, the sustained chords.
Yeah, and Iommi's just playing a supporting role in that whole intro. But you go back an album before that, and NIB, oh my God, the bass solo intro to that. Like, if that doesn't make you want to pick up a bass and start noodling around, you got a hole in your soul, man. And it can't be filled by a bass, apparently.
Pretty low hole to resonate that. But just, talk about Cliff Burton, used to the wah pedal, right? That's one of the first places it ends up with the bass guitar. So how the influences just keep moving back.
It always starts somewhere. So there's so many other ones that we can name out there. But one I want to say that I don't think anyone would come out with this if they have. Well, fucking hands off to them. But Bernard Edwards. Now, if you haven't heard of this guy, he was only active for a little while during the 70s, but he laid down the bass line for a song called Good Times. Doom, doom, doom. Doom, 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 doom. Ding, 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 doom, 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 doom. Which in turn got sampled by Sugar Hill Gang. I said hip hop, hip it to the hip hip hop, and you don't stop. Like, the influence that has, one of the first huge samples that came in hip hop. And that was groundbreaking. That was the first hip hop song to reach gold on the charts and stuff like that. And you think of stuff like that. So like we said, the influences go back and back. When it came to hip hop and sampling and everything like that, that bass line, my Lord, how many people have done covers of that? When the guys got together in late 90s there, I was in high school. I remember it was Redman. There's two other guys but they basically did an update on that. And it was brilliant. But like, how influential is stuff like that? You go back, and if you're not a fan of Motown, again, you got a hole in your soul, man. I love me some Motown. But the bass lines back then, shoot, man, so good. Weird sidebar, my son, 3.5 years old, for some reason, one of his favorite songs, we do not know where this came from, is Papa Was a Rolling Stone by Temptations. I come into the room one night and he's asking Alexa to play it. I'm like, what is going on here? How do you know my favorite Motown song? Anyways, wicked bass line in that too. And there was just such great stuff coming out back then. Like, that was just a great era for good bass lines. Like Bootsy Collins, like so many good ones back then. But yeah, for me, it's hard to narrow down specific songs for stuff because it's like picking a favorite child.
So baseline number one, or did you go through five? Sorry, if I
think I hit at least 5 different guys there. But if you want to do a deep dive, look up anything by those guys there, and you will not be disappointed.
So Bernard Edwards, and again, the intention, Motown, funk, maybe a bit of disco, and then ends up maybe more influential on hip hop than any other genre. So
absolutely.
All right, Bernard Edwards. That's a good deep find. So. The bass lines, the bass player tend to be, a little bit more mysterious in the back, not as high profile, flashy. But now we'll get to that part. Top 5,
unless you're Steve Harris.
Iron Maiden. That's what a band. But no stranger to this topic either, Iron Maiden. But what are your top 5 guitar solos, Josh?
Again, I had a hard time breaking it down here. So I'm going to say 5 guys. I'm going to start at number 1 this time. And it's Dimebag. Like I said, he's the reason I picked up a guitar. The things that he could make a guitar express, like, it's just mind blowing. Like, you look at footage of him from when he was like 14 years old, and he can outplay anyone on the planet with such feeling and just fluidity and fun and just the mind-bending. I cannot explain how good Dimebag. So, like, not even just music, but as a person, outside of music, he was a big influence on me too. Like just treating other people with kindness and compassion and stuff. Like you want to learn that from your parents and society and everything like that. But Dimebag was a big influence on me that way. There was a time where I sported quite a large beard. At one time, I had the whole Dimebag, like 7-inch goatee going. Like, yeah, I've had my times. And Dime was just such a big part of that, and it always is. I listen to Pantera weekly still. But literally, you cannot narrow down his solos for that. Maybe start at Domination and work your way from there. Like it's like, oh, so good.
There was interesting, like with the, like you're saying, like all the different tones, different types of sounds he could make, but also just as interesting rhythmically as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They were what carried metal through the early 90s and really brought it to the forefront of the aughts. It's just the thing that they're really generally referred to, I guess you could say, is groove metal, and they had a pronounced groove. I mean, the Abbott brothers on drums and guitar, it's so reminiscent of other big bands throughout history that had that familial collection or connection, like Van Halen, which was a big influence on them. Right. And Eddie Van Halen is one of the 5 guys on my list here. I mean, one of the biggest influences on Dime himself, the double tapping, everything like that. He, when Van Halen first started out, Eddie wouldn't face the audience when he was playing because he didn't want people to pick up his techniques, everything like that. He was very secretive about that. And you kind of have to be sometimes to be an innovator like that, to take what was been done before you and, really refine it so that no one can ape off it. But he was just brilliant. And David Lee Roth was one of my favorite frontmen of all time. He had that personality, man. And, some of that has probably seeped into myself over time. I know my mom used to say I would run around the house when I was little singing one of his solo songs, Just a Gigolo, just the chorus, I got nobody. But yeah, he's always been kind of there. But yeah, you can't say enough good stuff about Eddie Van Halen's guitar solos. Literally every single one of them. Let's go with a couple that you might not immediately bring to the forefront, but in my books, they're tops. One, I've actually had the pleasure of a couple conversations on Twitter with Mark Morton from Lamb of God, lead guitar player for them. Funny guy. But his playing, oh my god, like you play their album from 2004, and the first track off it is just the opening riff is like a solo. It's like, how do you have the balls to start a song off like that? That's just amazing. Like, I still to this day have trouble playing that riff. It's like, oh man, it's so good. Like, how do you not get caught up? Like, like you have the balls to start an album off like that. Kudos to you, Mark Morton and Lamb of God. Woo!
Well, yeah, just based on your interpretation there, it sounds very like, a riff will generally have similar rhythmic feeling throughout the riff. It's kind of a melody. You want it to be somewhat repetitive, but that seemed like that was going from single string notes to power chords, kind of back and forth, and just kind of different types of rhythmic motifs all within the same riff. So very, very much like a solo composed beginning, middle, end.
Yeah, and like I couldn't articulate the pinch harmonics and stuff like that, obviously, but there's some of those placed in there too. But yeah, his solo work, he's very kind of Southern influenced. He lives in Virginia himself. It's really, really good stuff. I like some stuff with some feel to it.
Well, Southern influence, like the Abbott brothers are from Texas, right?
Yep. Yes, they are.
There you go. So music from the South that
yeah, I swear to God, in another lifetime, I was born in the South, man. Like a barbecue, Southern rock, everything like that, just give it to me. You can leave all that Confederate stuff on the wayside, but I'll take the rest of it. I'll take the eats and the good tunes.
Yummy.
But while we're on the topic of more kind of melodic and feel stuff, I want to put this name out there, Michael Ackerfeld, from the band Opeth, kind of melodic Swedish death metal. But you want to talk a guy that can go like we're just talking vocally first before we dive into the guitar part, but his vocals can go from the most clean, beautiful operatic vocals or like the most soft, silent, mournful, beautiful, haunting melodies, just the most guttural. Like at the snap of a finger, he's so brilliantly talented. And then you get to his guitar work, man. This guy is just like so much 70s prog influence in there. And it's beautiful. His playing is much like his vocals. It can go from the most clean passages to the most intricate rhythm, just guttural sounds. Like it's brilliant. If you don't listen to Opeth, please do yourself a favor and check them out. And then the last one, Tony Iommi, the originator, the godfather of metal as we know it when it comes to guitar and everything like that, through twists of natural fate. But a guy that's missing the tips of two fingers should not be able to play guitar as well as he does. I mean, like, he's brilliant. People could spend their entire lives locked in a room writing riffs, and they couldn't come up with as many good ones as this guy has since 1970 on records. And I will put my name on that. He's one of the best. He's overcome cancer. Like he's just phenomenal. But you want to talk about solos? Whoa, baby, go put on some classic Black Sabbath, man. Anything from the Ozzy years, even anything from the early Dio years, man. It's just so good. I cannot say enough good. Like, who hasn't heard of Tony Iommi from this point, man? Like, he's just one of the gods. One of the gods.
And even if you're not a fan of Iommi or Black Sabbath itself, if you're a fan of metal,
you owe everything to this man.
Like they all gained either direct or indirect influences from him. And I think the idea is, it's the soundscape, right? Like it's okay. You're working with the distortion, working with certain specific tones, but the technique was it's a lot of just blues stuff, right? It's the same 100%. Thing that kind of been played, back to Robert Johnson. Wasn't really much different from what he was doing in the 30s, right? So just a lot more distorted and kind of intended to sound evil, almost more. Instead of sounding sad, you kind of go for the more menacing kind of side of blues, right? And just emphasis on that, and then you have metal, basically.
That's absolutely it, man. And because of the accident where he lost the tips of his two fingers there, had to down tune his strings and everything. So it was a lot of like C tuning and all that, which, deeper notes, lower notes, sounds a bit more evil, using that tritone in there, which is a classically banned chord in the Catholic Church because of its evil connotations. Music is the devil. But
so to be fair, it doesn't seem like it's a high threshold for the Catholic Church to ban anything, right? Like it seems like it's a pretty low bar. So
no doubt. But yeah, Iommi's the king. It all comes back to him.
All right. Well, I guess back to where we started. Fantasy sports kind of uniting us all, but again, the NFL draft's coming up. So, Josh, thanks for kind of staying with us before press coverage, or again, our final episode before the NFL draft, before the entire landscape has changed, because it's not like this crazy NFL offseason has been landscape altering every week. It seems like
slowed down a little bit lately, but it's crazy. I've never seen an off season like this, for better or for worse. For worse if you're a Cowboys fan, but anyways.
Yeah. So, Josh, again, thanks very much. Do you want to let the people know where they can find and follow you?
Yeah, you can go hit me up. I'm not on too many different things. I keep it pretty simple, so you can hit me up on Twitter at SmokeyHellNFL. At the top of my profile there, I have a newsletter that I do. It's all for free. Basically stuff that doesn't make it onto the podcast episodes. I'll write 1,000 or 2,000 words on it. Just throw it up on there. And then, you can subscribe to that. You can hit me up on YouTube. The Smoke Show is my thing. You can go to ViridianGlobal.com and check out the Smoke Show merchandise, where you can find these fine hats, these fine t-shirts with the Joker logo on there. Yes, that's my face. And it says Smokey. But it's awesome. I have so much fun with this. You can watch me and listen to me and have fun as well. We keep things pretty light around the Smoke Show.
Viridian Global also sponsors the Going for Two shirts. So yeah, definitely check out ViridianGlobal.com. Again, check out goingfor2.com as well for all your great resources, not just for football, NFL, and the draft, but DFS for NBA, baseball, all sorts of sports. So great DFS site going for 2 as well. You got the Personal League podcast as well for $100, which is just guess what? Divided by 12, that's less than $10. It's like $8 a person for a 12-team league. But we'll analyze all teams in your league, go manager by manager, and a few of us experts from Going for 2 get together and just talk about general strategy, also specific player things that each manager can do to kind of help better their team. So these Personal League podcasts, again, go to goingfor2.com/PLP. And the person, check out the Personal League podcasts, the PLPs, and all the other great stuff on the Going for 2 Live Network. Already mentioned, next week the draft, I guess April 28th through April 30th, we'll be on Going for 2 Live the entire length of the NFL draft. So Thursday night, Friday night, different groups of hosts, and then Dynasty Gambit, our special episode Saturday. But there's always great shows on the Going for 2 Live Network. Just this week, as always, we'll have the Armchair Show on Wednesday. Usually Friday we've got to either bet on it or the hot route. And next Monday, the 2-point conversion, I already kind of referenced that earlier, had Adam on rank last week. So check out next Monday. Gladys and Jay will be back with, I'm sure, some great topics. But again, thank you very much, Josh. This was amazing. Hope the listeners enjoyed it as well. But also thank you, listeners, for watching and viewing as well.
Thanks, y'all. It was my pleasure being on, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
And Kyle Senra here signing out for press coverage. And I just gotta say, where there's smoke,
there's fire. I never get to say this part of it.
I figured you'd get a kick out of that. I had a kick having you on, Josh, and thank you for bringing the energy even right at the very end.
Woo! That's right, baby. You know what you get with the smoke show.
And again, everything Going for 2. Thank you, Jeff, for having this great platform for us. And thank you all the listeners for making this platform something that's worth watching, right? We're nothing without the viewers and listeners. So again, shout out. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Josh. And once again, I'm Kyle Senra. This is Press Coverage.